Hello, everyone. Welcome to Design on Purpose with the Mentor Me Collective. I am Chanel. I am the CEO and founder of the Mentor Me Collective. I'm super excited to have you all here because we have an amazing guest design mentor who's going to be joining us, spilling all the tea and all the gems when it comes to the foundations of product design for this product design 101 session. So as you all are entering in, please let us know where you are tuning in from. Let us know if you are from the ATL. I saw someone from the ATL. Folks is from Ohio, all the things. We definitely want to just say hello. And again, welcome you. Also, we want you to go ahead and share this broadcast because, again, this is completely free. And we do want to make sure that anyone who is interested in design or any kind of career in design has the ability to go ahead and be a part. Okay, so go ahead, take a moment and go ahead and share. Again, we're on LinkedIn Live. So if you have, someone that you know is interested, go ahead and text them, send them a text, let them know that we're live, shoot over that link. And yeah, we're so excited to have you all again with us. So now, as you all know, there's a couple of things and a couple of announcements that we always go over when it comes to our events that we have. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right on in them. Again, welcome again. Happy Black History Month to all of my folks who are part of the African/Black diaspora. This is an amazing, powerful month where we are just celebrating our amazing history. Again, just from the collective family, want to say welcome again and Happy New Year. Again, we already talked about sharing, so just go ahead and take a moment to do that. There's multiple ways that you can go ahead and share, and I'm going to hop into that in just a moment. We already talked about LinkedIn, but you can also take a selfie in our virtual photo booth. So we're going to dive into that in a little bit. Again, announcements. First and for starters, as you know, this whole week is going to be jam-packed with some amazing events, front-end engineering, user experience research. We have some UI and UX design as well, systems design, all of the things. So if you do not want to miss that, please go ahead and make sure that you text MMC to 866-901-1914. That is going to allow you to go ahead and opt into our text messages so that we can just text you literally on the minute of when we are going live and when we are going to get started as well. Also want to let you know that we have an Etsy shop. Yes, some exclusive bomb Black History merch. Guys, I'm actually wearing some now. I get mine super big so I can sleep in it, but y'all, besides the point. So you'll notice here, it's pretty dope. It is an amazing fabric, definitely awesome quality. So definitely want you guys to go ahead and lean into that. Again, all of the proceeds for this definitely goes to a fundraiser to help Black and Latinx folks purchase software and devices to help jumpstart their career in tech. Very important. I know as a first gen myself, it was pretty hard to come up with some funds. So I don't want that to be the story for others who are within our community. Go ahead and head to etsy.com/shop/mentormecollective. Y'all, we are giving away free shipping this month. So if you type in free ship in the promo code section, you will get free shipping on orders $30 and more. Okay. Yes. So with that being said, we have an amazing MMC Black History Month giveaway. It would not be in a Mentor Me Collective soiree of events without a bomb giveaway. So with that being said, we have awesome products that we're going to be giving away. Again, anyone who wants to purchase any kind of item, one item from our Etsy shop, we're going to go ahead and pay for that fully. We don't only have t-shirts, we have blankets that are bomb, velvet blankets, we have tumblers and all that kind of stuff. So go ahead and check it out. We are going to be giving away a HomePod Mini, not the Apple Watch itself. I couldn't find a band by itself, but the Apple Watch Black History Month Unity Band in the braided solo loop. So if you guys are interested in that, we'll definitely do that for you as well. And then also a Hydrate Smart water bottle. The bottle literally tells you when you need to drink water. It is super dope. It lights up. It connects to your phone. It tells you how much water you're drinking, and you can compete with your friends. So who wouldn't want that? Absolutely. So in order to enter our giveaway, there's 3 different things that you need to do. Obviously, make sure that you attend all of our sessions. The way that you can go ahead and let us know that you were at a session is letting us know by going to our photo booth, snapping a picture and tagging us on Instagram, LinkedIn, or any of our social media accounts. We're on a plethora of them. Also, we do have a scanning QR code. So just Give us a moment. We're going to get there in just a second. And there's also stickers that you can add there. So every session that you're a part of, make sure you tap the sticker that says, product design 101, UX engineering 101, blah, blah, blah. The next thing that we want you to do again is to grab your pencils. We do want to make sure that you are leaning in and taking all of the amazing gems that all of our speakers are coming to hand over. And again, just taking advantage of that. So the way that we want you again to lean into that, we are going to be sending a quiz. And you'll know when that quiz goes live when you actually text our number and opt into that as well. So go ahead and let that and text that number. And then last but not least, again, we want you to stay connected with us. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and of course on LinkedIn, which you all are tuned in for and watching us live. Again, we talked about the smile, the photo booth. We definitely want to see those pearly whites, add a sticker, and again, tag us. This is the QR code that will take you directly to our photo booth. So I'm definitely going to leave this up here for just a moment. What you want to do is take your phone. You want to go ahead and open up your camera app, and you want to point it directly at the QR code. You'll notice that a link pops up on your phone. You want to go ahead and tap that, and it takes you directly to our wonderful photo booth. Again, we talked about grabbing your pens and pencils. Again, I just want to plug here as well. Text MMC to 866-901-1914. Again, that is MMC to 886-901-1914. And then lastly, we talked about all of the social media spaces that we're on. Definitely make sure you are following us. We are going to be checking that, okay? So go ahead and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and then obviously also on YouTube as well, because we will be having some events later on this month on YouTube. So we would love for you all to join us there as well. Now for the main event. We have the amazing Maya. She is absolutely phenomenal. My journey started with her while I was working with the Where Are the Black Designers, which is an amazing platform as well. So if you are interested in design, please go ahead and plug into their community. But yeah, Maya reached out, and her company is amazing. They really are passionate about making sure that they are giving back and also mentoring the next generation when it comes to folks interested in product design or just design in general. So I'm super excited to pass it on over to you, and I'm going to welcome her to the stage in just a moment. Welcome, Maya. How are you?
Good. How are you? Can y'all hear me okay?
Oh, absolutely. We can absolutely hear you.
Awesome.
We're so excited, and we're so excited to have you here as well. Maya, tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get into the space with OM Design Studios?
For sure. Yes. My journey starts way back when I was in college. I actually went to school for civil engineering. And I kind of knew right away, even while I was in school, that it probably wasn't quite the right path for me. But, parents, they're always about achieve your highest dreams and all that good stuff. Get an engineering degree. It'll set you up for success type of thing. So I did the thing, and I worked as a civil and environmental engineer for a couple of years. But as I was doing that, I really just felt like I wasn't being able to express myself creatively within my job. There are rules and regulations in place for a reason. We want clean water whenever possible. However, what that meant was a lot of my job was just very much plug and play and was pretty boring. And not to mention stinky, because I literally worked at wastewater treatment plants sometimes. So while I was at that job, I, stumbled into product design via reading about microeconomics and social psychology. I was also checking out some other career paths as well, but then found that product design is such a great combination of some of the skills that I learned in engineering school, that logical thinking, problem solving, but is kind of like the wild, wild west in terms of it's such a new field and is continuously growing so quickly. You're able to, still teach yourself as well as do some stuff that's pretty creative, in terms of building websites and applications or designing them and then working with teams to do so. It's a pretty cool place to be. And so, after self-teaching for a bit, took about a year and some change, I landed my first role in product design for a small consulting firm. From there, I worked at Athena Health for a little bit, and then finally ended up at OM Studio this past April, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, I'm so excited for you. And as you all can see, y'all, it's possible. Okay, we out here career pivoting, and getting into the space, and just building products that we're very passionate about that also impact various kinds of communities. So I'm so excited to have you here. You're already inspiring the crowd here. So I'm just going to go ahead and hand it on over to you. Thanks so much again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. All right. Awesome. Alrighty, Chanel already got it all set up for me. Amazing. All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you again to Mentor Me Collective for having me. So excited to be here to talk with you all a little bit about product design. As I previously did my intro, my name is Maya Reinhardt. I am from Springfield, Massachusetts, but I'm currently living in San Jose, Costa Rica. And how I managed that can be, remote work 101, which we'll have to do later. So talk to Chanel if y'all want to hear about that. But product design, that's what I'm here to chat with you all about today. So as mentioned, I work for OM Studio. We are a very small product design agency that's fully remote, and folks are scattered across the US and I guess also now here in Costa Rica. We work with some pretty cool clients like Stripe, Airbnb, Google, to assist them in some projects they have got going on, where we work just like your typical agency. So, they call us in to do a client project. We work with them and then hand stuff off to their developers to build. So it's a pretty cool space to be in. I get to work on a variety of projects, which I really like, as well as I enjoy being at a smaller studio just because of the freedom and flexibility of kind of knowing all your coworkers and things like that. But of course, I'm sure many of you are wondering, what do I actually do? Well, we design websites and applications based off of user and business needs while keeping accessibility standards and industry patterns in mind. So that's a whole bunch of words, but it gets even worse. Some of you may have done some research on your own of what that looks like, user experience design, user research, content writing, UI design, persona building, the list goes on and on of all the little tiny things that I do. And I'm here to kind of explain what that process looks like and how we move through the design cycle. What it looks like essentially is something like this. So the first thing that we typically do when we are handed a new project is to research the problem and also user needs. So like, what do users need to accomplish? Like, quite literally, is it applying for a job, or is it signing up for some new thing? Are you just trying to get a ride? Is this like an Uber type of situation where you need to get from point A to point B? So the first bit is really pretty easy, just has to do with research. The second part is defining goals and parameters. So that's when you start to put some edges on what the problem is. And so that as you're designing, you can leverage patterns and things that exist already in the industry to make sure that you're truly going in the right direction and not trying to boil the ocean or trying to do too many things at once. From there, we design and build prototypes and test until we get it right. And what this looks like more officially is a design methodology, which is just a series of steps based off of design thinking. So design thinking is a process by which has become famous via the consultancy IDEO. You can totally check them out if you'd like, but essentially design thinking is pretty similar to the scientific method. And yes, it's that thing from school. And so I like to think of design thinking very similar to the scientific method. This probably has to do with my engineering background and all of the millions of chemistry classes that I had to take, but it's just a really great way to anchor how you move through a problem solving, right? It's a tried and true process that allows to push out as much bias as possible, to empathize and do all that great stuff. So that first step, like I mentioned, is to research and empathize. The second step is to define, so putting those parameters on. The third and fourth steps are to ideate and prototype. So what that means is you're churning out some designs, you're building some clickable prototypes, and then finally to test. And then you essentially repeat this whole thing until you land somewhere that feels pretty good and the developers build it. And honestly, the cycle kind of restarts again, especially if you are working in-house on a product. So what does research and empathize look like? So as I mentioned, you are going to learn about your users, your stakeholders' goals, and your business needs. I wanted to take a second to talk about that a little bit because within the world of product design, we talk a lot about advocating for users and making sure that users' needs are met. but we don't necessarily talk too much about the other folks in the room. And by that, I mean stakeholders as well as the business itself. So typically on a project, you as the designer will be working alongside an engineering lead. So the developers that are going to build this product for you, as well as a product manager or a PM who will assist and speak for the business. And so you, of course, are advocating for the users. However, these other two opinions in the room sometimes can push or pull in certain directions. And so a huge portion of this job is simply communication. And so you're leveraging different avenues via research, like surveys, diary studies, and one-on-one interviews to learn more about your users and advocate for them. And so what that looks like, though, of course, when you're in that room with those two other opposing opinions is, a decent amount of just relationship management. So if y'all work in fields and you're looking to pivot into the product design world, like, even just the service industry, y'all are used to dealing with folks on a day-to-day basis, as well as communicating and working through some stuff. If you're a manager in a different industry, honestly, all those really small people skills, or soft skills as they call them, are honestly kind of like the hardest part of my day sometimes, when I am working with those stakeholders to help them push their biases aside, as well as leveraging, the direction that the business needs to go into. And what that means is something like, we need to make X, dollars to stay afloat. How can we make sure that folks are purchasing or whatever they need to do? So there's a lot of push and pull going on in this research and empathize stage, where you are working not only to research and understand what the user's needs, but also to work with your product and business partners to make sure that you are headed in the right direction for everyone. And so how you head in that direct direction is through this define step. So what you do is you align on a common problem and goal through things like how might we exercises, sticky note grouping activities, as well as user journey mapping. And what that looks like, it can be done either virtually or within a room with other folks. But of course, you're just trying to come to terms with those user needs, as well as, like I mentioned, those business and stakeholder needs. And so you're doing this through, for instance, the sticky note grouping activity looks something like this, where everybody might write down the different ideas that they have with a timer set. And then after that activity, y'all group them to common themes. So then you can eventually define some goals for the project that everybody aligns on and are very specific. So, those classic SMART goals that allow everybody to move forward with the project in the right way. And that third bit of ideating and prototyping. So this is where you'll use a design tool to create mockups and clickable prototypes. And I'll let y'all know, I know this slide deck is pretty dense with information purposefully so that y'all can take this away if you'd like to leverage it as you move through potentially a career transition. But I promise this part is the part where we will show some mockups. I am unfortunately under NDA for a lot of my projects, but I am able to show something with you, which is pretty great. But the ideate and prototype step probably takes the longest, to be perfectly honest. And you may have seen through your own research that you might leverage a design tool to create a quick mock-up, or you might leverage paper and pencil. I know when I am tasked with a new design problem that I might not know how to attack at first, I always go back to a classic piece of paper and a pencil and start drawing out some wireframes and things like that, some basic sketches on how to move forward. And that has been incredibly helpful to me, especially when you're trying to communicate with other folks. Drawing things out, especially with other designers, we're such visual people. It's always useful to communicate in the way that you see fit. But some other online applications that you may have heard of are Figma, Adobe XD, and Sketch. They're all pretty similar applications, some having freemium models so that you're able to download and use those right now. I know, for instance, like Figma is in the browser, which is pretty great because you can use it, of course, on any desktop. Or I think they may even have a mobile app, which seems kind of crazy to me to want to design on my phone. I just like huge screens. But in this ideate and prototype step, what you're doing, though, truly is looking at existing applications, for instance, that might have been a part of your research phase. And what you're doing by looking at those existing applications is to understand patterns. So in the world of product design, especially since the internet has been around for quite a while at this point, there are tons of patterns that y'all probably don't even realize exist that you deal with every day. I think the classic, of course, is within Microsoft Word, or even that 3.5 floppy A disk that is your save button. Most folks today, or younger generations today, don't even know what that thing was. I barely remember what it was, but we all know it's synonymous with the save button. Similarly, you might see, of course, like an arrow pointing in the right direction with the different arrows on either side. That we immediately know is a play button. Well, of course, the two lines are pause, which is something that has come along for the ride as well from the analog days. But some other types of interactions and patterns that you may not even realize exist thus far, especially in the US, is simply your address filler. You've always got the street, there's usually 2 bars, so you can do the second address, and it always looks essentially the same with like a save or continue onwards. Even I'd say the checkout process standardized by the likes of Amazon or even Shopify or any of those type of checkout processes, whenever it looks a little bit different, I myself get confused. So you see, there's all these patterns that now exist that we've just become accustomed to that you want to leverage in your designs. There's no point in remaking the wheel, as well as it's important because folks know what those are. And when they're approaching a new application, they're going to, rely on their past experiences to understand where to go next. And so if you leverage those patterns, it can be incredibly powerful. So that's one piece of it. Additionally, within these applications, especially for myself and working with some established companies, they've got things called design systems. And so what a design system is essentially a set of components. So, and a component you can just think of as like a building block that they have built within one of these applications for you to leverage so that you can stay on brand with what they look like, as well as those typically follow accessibility standards, which is of course incredibly important, especially as we move into a more connected world, to make sure that your application or whatever that you're designing is as accessible as possible. And so within that design system, you may have things like buttons or text inputs or all these little pieces that you can easily push together to create things, like I said, that checkout form where you're already going to have a lot of the design work done for you, or that UI work done for you, which can be incredibly helpful, especially when jumping off the ground. And so for any of you who may be struggling with getting your UI up to par, I know that's a tricky thing. A couple of suggestions I have for y'all is to, one, leverage existing design system libraries that exist out there. So for instance, Google has one, Apple has one, and you can just literally Google material design, which is Google's, and then you've got all the basics for an Android. And what's really great about it is because the accessibility is built in. So for instance, your button needs to be a certain size, height and width in pixels. You don't even need to worry about doing it yourself. That's both for accessibility as well as just remembering. I know that was huge for me when I was starting out, because I could never remember what sizes things need to be, and then I'd be Googling it. It was like a whole thing. So it's really easy if you can just leverage those existing components. And once you have put together, your first few screens, these applications allow you to link things together into a clickable prototype. And so folks can click through it, and you are able to test it by, watching folks click through it to see if they accomplish things in the way that you expected them to. And then, of course, pivoting if they do not. And I will tell you, user testing sessions, especially with designs, is always an interesting time. You're always going to learn something new from your users, and then of course pivot from there. And so I mentioned, a few seconds ago, this something called a design system. And I've got a link within this deck, which we did create an accessible dark mode UI kit. It's within the Figma community. You're welcome to go find it. But what I'm showing in these images here is just your classic login screens, right? So you would download, potentially added an email and password, the similar way that we all do it today. You might log in, as well as maybe you want to add some contact information. And I show this to show you just some two things, right? Of course, patterns that we have, patterns that we're used to seeing in the real world, as well as what a design library might look like. So within that design system, you've got things like these email address and passwords. So those inputs that I mentioned, as well as this is a fully dark mode accessible library. So feel free to download that if you'd like to use it within your own projects. And so after you have created your prototypes, whether leveraging a design system or creating your own, as well as linking everything together for folks to use it, you test it. So yeah, you use your prototype to test with users as if it were the real thing. Then you update designs based on feedback from testing, and you honestly sometimes repeat essentially the prototype and test, ideate prototype and test steps a few times around until you feel like you've landed somewhere good, or your project is up. So that's another piece of this is time management. So time management, of course, is huge, especially for myself working with clients. We have set engagements. And so making sure when you are building out your project plan to have enough time to do all this stuff is pretty important, because it is important to test things as well as, run stuff through an accessibility checker, talk with folks to figure it all out. Yes, I see the comments. Time management is key for all things in life, right? We're always trying to do better. So some of you may be asking, how can you do this? So how can you potentially career change or pivot? How can you make this happen? And in the past have previously mentored with different boot camps like Thinkful, and I've answered this question quite a few times, especially for folks who are career transitioning or maybe are in their last few years of school. And I would say if you're trying to career transition, this is sort of what I did is first step is to figure out how you learn best. And what I mean by that is like, what is your learning style? You can totally Google this if you'd like to. But essentially, for me personally, I am not an auditory learner. So if somebody like this presentation, I would be scribbling down notes like crazy because just listening to someone is just not for me. I will not really remember it. It's hard for me to pay attention. And so what I learned through time, of course, is when I'm in a school setting, so for instance, somebody is lecturing, it's super important for me to write everything down. I literally have a notebook right here for later, just in case there are some questions that come through that I need to follow up on. Keep this with me at all times. So I write everything down, as well as I need to do it myself. So that's another piece is practice. Practice is incredibly important for me to learn. So first step is to figure out how you learn best, because then you can carve out time in your schedule to learn and also decide how best you would like to learn. So for instance, maybe it's a boot camp for you. Maybe it is actually going to, a master's degree or something like that, which there are quite a few of those out there right now. Or maybe you can learn just by, watching YouTube videos and reading, right? But it's carving out that time in your schedule to learn that is incredibly difficult and hard. And I understand because I graduated college with a whole bunch of student debt. I was very scared to go back and get a master's degree and get more debt. And so I was learning while also working full time, which was just exhausting and basically did not have a social life. But I knew I had to change careers and pivot. So I just dedicated and found that time. It might take you a little bit longer, but that's okay. If you really want to do this, you can. And so that next part I've got, of course, is practice through practice projects and things like that, as well as get any real world experience if you can. So what I mean by that is maybe you've got a cousin that sells t-shirts who has always wanted a website. Like, how can you hook them up? Are you able to design a logo for them to practice? Maybe if that's the direction that you want to go in, right? Additionally, if you can get an internship or something like that with an established company, that's even better. But of course, whatever practice you can do is incredibly important to build your portfolio, which I'll talk more about in a second. And then the fifth step, of course, is to network, which can be incredibly daunting and scary, but I do have some ideas for you there as well. So I mentioned this a little bit, which is like, how can I learn? So there's both self-paced learning versus more traditional learning. So self-paced is when you really buckle down and you teach yourself through online tutorials, maybe books and podcasts. Additionally, traditional learning, of course, a boot camp or a college degree program are some other options for you. I did a little bit of both. So for the first probably 6 to 7 months, I was doing a lot of online tutorials, reading tons of books, as well as just trying to absorb as much as I can, doing the practice that I mentioned. So doing some practice projects, as well as talking to folks and networking within the industry. And that's when somebody, this is about 4 years ago now, mentioned that a boot camp or some type of certificate would be really great to bolster what I'd already been doing. And so I ended up rounding out my education with a boot camp, but I found the cheapest boot camp for the most famous place. And I did that purposefully. So, fake it till you make it, right? Slap that name on your resume. Folks will see it, think you did the expensive one, and call it a day. And I'm not saying I didn't have the skills or the chops. I just really didn't have the cash at the time to pay for that expensive program. And now there are many more opportunities than there were even 4 years ago with scholarships and things like that. But it's true. Additionally, for that self-paced learning, I'll also tell you the other sneaky thing I did, which was for most of those boot camps, they will give you their syllabus for free. And so I took as many as I could find, and I just cross-referenced them. And what I mean by that is if they all said, you need to study design thinking, for instance, which I'm sure they do, I did that. So I just cross-referenced them to build my own syllabus to then learn from, to then eventually, round it all out with a boot camp. So that's another hack if you'd like, especially if you're first starting out and aren't really sure what best to study or topics to learn. I suggest snagging some of those syllabi, cross-referencing them, and then just start, search for reputable sources. For instance, I know some colleges, universities had information at the time, like MIT. I remember watching some videos from to get that base underneath you to decide if that's what you want to do. And I mentioned networking. So I will be the first to admit I hate networking. It is so stressful and daunting. I am very much an introverted person, especially when it comes to when we have to do in-person networking, going to a meetup. There's a million people there. Everybody's making awkward small talk. It's always awkwardly after work and you're starving. So that was also another thing is I'm trying to stuff my face with snacks while also trying to be sociable was just so hard. And so with networking, what I would do, because I knew how important it was, everybody's network, right? Was first to set a goal. And so a lot of times that goal was, okay, I'm going to go to this event and I'm going to talk to 3 people. And once I've talked to those 3 people, I do not need to do anything else. I'm going to listen to the presentation and then I'm going to leave. I talked to my 3 people, I'm good. And that's what I did, which made it a lot less daunting, right? To walk into a room and say, okay, I'm going to just talk to one person today, was just made it just a little bit easier because then, I'd walk in, I'd talk to that one person, I'd sit down. Usually there was a presentation of some kind. So during that presentation, I'd take that break and then I would leave and I'd pat myself on the back because, I achieved that goal and I networked. And there are a few different ways now. This was, of course, in person that you can network, which there are, of course, online and in-person conferences and events, which are incredibly important if you're able to go to them. Additionally, I'll add this little tidbit is a lot of conferences. So for instance, Smashing Conference, have scholarships for underrepresented groups and people. And I honestly think folks really don't apply to them because I have applied to these completely 5 seconds. I just write my responses. I don't even proofread them and just send it on through. And I have been awarded scholarships to some of these conferences. So if you see a conference that you're really interested in, either potentially message, and you cannot afford to go because a lot of these are very, very expensive, potentially message the organizers or take a look because they might have some scholarship opportunities for you that folks aren't taking advantage of, and you might just get it. So I'm telling you, just apply. You never know. Additionally, of course, there's LinkedIn, there's Slack workspaces, like Where Are the Black Designers, for instance. There are plenty of other Slack workspaces. I have had a lot of luck with Slack workspaces. The reason being, it's asynchronous communication, as well as folks usually post jobs in there and you can usually see who posted the jobs. So then you could potentially message them, and as soon as you get a person, it just feels a little bit more connected or lively than LinkedIn. I'll be the first to admit that LinkedIn completely overwhelms me. So y'all are welcome to reach out and add me on LinkedIn. You can find me. My name is Maya Reinhart. Please feel free to mention that you listen to this talk because, like I said, I just get very overwhelmed with LinkedIn and all the stuff going on. But the Slack workspaces were a little bit more focused for me, and I was able to, find folks that way. As well as, of course, there's tons of things cropping up now with Discord or other online communication tools. I know folks are using like Twitter Spaces, for instance, is another place. So feel free to check out those other things that you see there. But in terms of networking, what I suggest, so I mentioned the job application route, is if you see somebody who posted a job, you can follow up with them, of course. I always suggest to apply to the job first and then follow up, strictly because of how I use LinkedIn, which is I rarely check it because it's so overwhelming to me. And if you wait for folks to respond to you before applying to that job, it might be too late, right? So just apply, then say, hey, I applied for this job. They can always retroactively check in the system and see and push your resume or your information forward. As well as, at those conferences and events, reach out to folks, connect, ask your question or two. You don't always have to find a mentor at these things, right? You can just ask those couple questions. Like I said, I met that one person at that one event. I never talked to her again. And she was the first person that I met who had career transitioned, not just from graphic design, but from like a fully different field. And she was like, the boot camp certificate would really help you. And I took that advice. Again, thank you, person. I don't even remember what your name was. Apologies, but I appreciated it because here I am today. And so finally, how might you get a job? So the key piece, of course, to getting your foot in the door, for those folks who don't know already, is to have a portfolio with example projects. And there are a couple ways to have a portfolio. You can have a freestanding website that, like mine is myreinhardt.com. I have not updated it in a while. But if you might not be able to afford to pay for a domain, or potentially like a Squarespace or a Wix or something like that, Figma prototypes, as well as other prototypes that you can just link, are completely another option for you that 100% will work. Because like I mentioned, those prototypes look like real websites and applications. So if you really get it perfect and linked together really well and can just set your Figma prototype, which Figma does allow for a free project, in with your application, that is 100% a valid way for you to be able to share the stuff that you have been working on. Some other free ways to do that might be to save your work as a PDF within a Google Drive. That might be another cheaper way for you to be able to share your work without having to have a freestanding website. Additionally, so the first bit is, having a portfolio with example projects. The second part, of course, is to have a case study presentation ready. And I'm sure the Mentor Me Collective can assist and has resources for what that means. But what it essentially means is those practice projects that you have, you will need to talk through the entire design process, as well as explain your reasoning behind it, to show and prove that you know how to do this. And so that basically takes about a half an hour within the interviewing process to go through that. Of course, applying. So for those folks who are in the application phase right now, I am so sorry. Applying for jobs is so tough, especially right now. It's a pretty intense market, especially for junior designers. But what I'm saying is apply. Sometimes it's a numbers game. And even if you get a call back from a place that you're not that excited about, practicing your presentation as well as your interviewing skills, if you can and have the bandwidth to. I understand it's exhausting. Is incredibly important, because when you do land the interview with your dream job, you've done it a million times and it doesn't feel as scary. And so that's what I mean by practicing those interview steps as well, if you can, with folks. And so what I mean by interview steps is a typical product design interview looks something like this. First, there's a phone screen where they check to make sure you are a human being. I suggest dropping as many fancy words about product design as you can in this portion, because it's usually a hiring manager or HR person or somebody who's not necessarily going to be your manager. And they are kind of just have a checklist sometimes. I literally one time in a phone screen had somebody say, you mentioned all the design words that I know, so I'm going to pass you on through. So, talk yourself up, make yourself sound smart. That next bit is that case study review that I mentioned, where you are going to walk through a project that you have. Usually folks will let you know what they'd like to learn, so you can cater your case study review to what they've asked for. So what I mean by that is sometimes they may want to know, what is a problem, a really hard problem that you solved? And so in that case, you might want to present, go deep dive on one problem and how you solved it versus please explain your design thinking process, which is a much more, grand and much wider idea. And in that case, you might just want to very vaguely go through a whole project. And the final bit is some sort of like culture fit type of interview. You might have, or sorry, I skipped the design challenge. So you might also have a design challenge or an app review. Similarly, a design challenge is when they present you with something that they'd like you to design. These are really tough, and I highly suggest practicing before you have one of these. The app review is a little bit more chill, where basically you walk through an application together and talk about some of the design choices that they might have made and why. And then the final bit is a culture fit, which is usually just when you're meeting with somebody from your team or your boss to make sure that, everything's chill and you all get along. And then eventually, hopefully, if it all goes well, you will then get the offer, which is always a really exciting thing. And if you're nervous about potentially asking those hard questions, usually by the time you get to the culture fit, you're in pretty good standing. So if you're waiting to maybe ask some tougher questions or things like that, by all means, do it whenever you feel confident and comfortable. But I tend to save the really tough ones for like after I've got the offer, because I know like they want me. So now I can be like, what are you doing to improve your diversity and things like that? So whatever you consider to be a tough question, feel free to ask it whenever you'd like, but I tend to save them until after because I get nervous. And so if that all sounded easy to you, I'm not sure if it did, but it definitely isn't easy. I mean, no huge changes, especially if you're changing careers. But I'm here to tell you that it is possible. You will, be on your own journeys as well as working through this on your own. It can feel incredibly daunting and that you're doing all the wrong things. I'm here to tell you I felt that way for the entire time that I was self-teaching. Felt like I had made the wrong decision, had no idea if it was going to work out. And is this the final career move for me? I don't know, and that's okay. But does it feel like the best fit for me right now? For sure. And there's so many opportunities as well as cool things going on within the tech world. Never mind the pay doesn't hurt, as well as, like I mentioned, is a little bit of the wild, wild west. So it's pretty cool that you get to be on the forefront of some of this really awesome stuff, as well as then your whole family can start asking you really annoying questions, as well as complain about stuff that you have absolutely no control over. So that's always a fun thing to have at family gatherings. And so I leave you with some resources that I'll very quickly run through so that you know what they are. Got a couple of articles here. So Design Thinking, like I mentioned, IDEO, as well as UX Collective on Medium is pretty great for information. We've got some books here I love to read. The User Experience Team of One is a really great baseline, especially if you are alone on your team. Just Enough User Research, I'm literally reviewing that right now because I'm on a research project at work. Mismatch is all about accessibility, which is really pretty great. And Sprint is all about the Google Design Sprint, which was one of the first books I read, and I think is pretty interesting because even when I was an engineer, you can leverage some of those tools there. Podcasts, UI Narrative, which is really great. Tulu interviews designers and is a really great host. I was on the podcast, not trying to just say because I was on it, it's really great, but she's just an amazing human. And then 99% Invisible is just about design in general. It doesn't necessarily only have to do with product design, but it's just a really great intro to design, as well as here are some folks to follow if you would like to, follow on Instagram or follow on Twitter for some folks to learn more about UX. And that is it. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Excited for the Q&A.
Awesome. I am so excited. This has been such an amazing session. Even for me, I was writing and taking some notes. So I hope you all were as well, taking some notes as well. As the questions roll in, and you guys can feel free to drop all your questions in the comment section. We do see it on this end. So any question, there's no scalability of questions here. We're going to go ahead and jump into that in just a moment. But Maya, I really loved how you talked about how within your product design journey, especially currently, you are using different spaces within design, like research as well. So was research something that you've been familiar with for a while, or have you been learning like new techniques and so forth as you're currently in the role?
Yeah, great question. So I feel like research is a big part of not just UX. I mean, if you even just go back to the regular world, right, you'll see folks at the grocery store asking you, which type of thing do you like best? So research is so old school and really great. So you can like even look back to the past on all those really great methodologies to borrow them. It's definitely something that, in my experience, especially working in consulting, kind of gets just shoved in there. So currently right now, I finally, for the first time, have a fully only research-based project. And so to your question, yes, right now I reread the Just Enough user research as well as been, looking online and Nielsen Norman Group, all that great stuff to better understand research methodologies because I finally have the time to feel like I can do it right. So yes, so although research is usually a part of the process, both at the beginning when you're like figuring out who the users are and what they need and working with your stakeholders, but also of course in the middle when you're testing what you've designed. I wish up until this point, I've been able to have more time to feel like I really did an amazing job. But even just a little bit of research can be, I'm sure, eye-opening as to the direction you should go in.
I think that is phenomenal. And definitely with my background also being in UX research and really, well, specifically for accessibility, but it's important for us to get the value perspective of our user and our audience of the products that we're building. So I love that. I have another question, I guess, as questions are rolling in. And yes, Lauren, the presentation is going to be viewable. It is actually being live recorded on YouTube and here on LinkedIn, so you can view it on either platforms. But yeah, my next question would be in regards to product design, because there's so many different types of, I guess, product design. I would love to hear about your perspective going from like the civil space of like engineering now into the product design space. Like what kind of concepts were even transferable, even though maybe that would have been more so like hardware and now you're designing software?
Totally. Yeah. So hilarious, right? The tech industry borrowed this word product design, which like has so many, like, am I an inventor? Am I working as a mechanical engineer? Like we just tried to own this term when it's like
so true.
so vague for anybody who's not specifically, in software. So great question. Product design, of course, it supposedly is definitely a more of a generalist role where you've got some user experience stuff happening. It's the marriage of the three, right? The user research and then the UI design. I enjoy being a generalist. I think it's a lot of fun. It's kind of why I like working at smaller companies, because I get to kind of put my hands in all the pots and start to just keep things rolling. I like working in consulting for that same reason, where I'm able to work on a variety of different projects, though I definitely see the value of course, working in-house and being able to see, you'll be able to iterate a little bit more than me just like handing off all of my babies. But to answer the second half of your question, which had to do with coming from civil engineering to the software space, I'd say the pieces that were the most transferable were the problem solving process. So the scientific method or design thinking really stuck with me. That's something that I learned a lot about in school. Although I was solving for different problems, it's still a very similar process. In terms of the, communication idea, like that is so important, as I'm sure even just presenting findings, any presentation you've ever had to do, I feel like comes into play and is really useful. Additionally, I was working as an engineer in a consulting agency, in a consulting company. So all the consulting stuff was the same, right? We still had clients, we still had deadlines, we still had contracts, we still had client relationships. So a lot of that was really transferable over into my first design job. So those are the pieces that were definitely the most transferable. Where I had to, learn a lot was, of course, within user research and the different methodologies there, as well as practicing them. And the UI design portion was also a bit where I had to do a little bit extra work.
That's so cool. That's so cool. We see some questions flowing in now. Here is a question from Michelle. Being fully remote, how do you build relationships with your team? That's a really good question.
Yeah, great question. So at OM, we do a lot of different things. So this is from like the company level. I'll talk about that and then I'll talk about personal level. So we are a fully remote team. There are 12 of us total. We have a whole bunch of different events. So, for instance, we have a yearly retreat where we all get to meet each other and hang out for a week. Additionally, we have, our classic weekly sync meetings where on Mondays we always, the higher ups present like what's going on this week, what they've been working on. On Fridays, we have a show and tell meeting where everybody talks about what they did that week. We've, of course, got our classic one-on-ones with each other periodically throughout the month to just connect on a more personal level and just chat about stuff. So, that human, that vulnerability, all that great stuff. And then we have other fun things going on too, like field trips and game nights. And the other piece I'd say is, being in year 3 of this pandemic, we are constantly evolving and changing because, Zoom fatigue is real. And, maybe we don't want to do game nights anymore. Maybe we don't want to have the field trips where we, one time we did like a watercolor class together, for instance. And so we're constantly evolving and changing with it, which I think is a really big piece. And then some other stuff we've done is like care packages where we send care packages to each other. Like you basically put together like a wish list and then it's kind of like a Secret Santa type of idea. We've done that a couple times, which is really nice, just get like a handwritten note and a nice little gift from somebody. So that's another thing. And then on a personal level, I just try to check in with folks, be very human, do the, how are you doing? And then like, how are you doing? And then like, but like, how are you doing? Because we're all on these screens, we put on these faces, and it helps to just be a little bit vulnerable and check in on folks. We additionally have a very flexible schedule, which is really nice, which assists with some of that stuff.
I love that. We have another question. I'm not sure who it's from, but we're going to go ahead and answer it here. Where do you see yourself moving towards next in your product design journey on a personal level? So I'm assuming, is that personal growth, career growth? I'm not sure, but anyway, that you like to answer that one.
I'll answer in a career growth way. So I would say I definitely see myself. So for folks who don't know, within product design, UX, UI design, within many industries, to be honest, you can kind of be like an independent contributor. So an IC in the sense that you just kind of put your head down and keep working on your craft and become like really, really good. So for instance, I'm talking about like a senior engineer who can do the work of like 10 junior engineers, right? Like that's when you're like really high up there as an IC and you're incredibly powerful or incredibly valuable for that role because, you can do the work of so many as well as you are usually mentoring and passing on that knowledge to other folks. And then of course there's the manager track, which is much more traditional business-y type of direction to go in to move forward in your career. And thankfully, I'm glad that this exists now, that you have like, the ability to be an IC and also manager and still be able to move up as well as, of course, receive the same pay. I see you nodding along, so I'm sure you know. And then additionally, there's the middle ground, which is like player coach, and that gets a little dicey. But I definitely believe that I am on the manager track. I love doing things like this. I love giving back. I love helping folks. I love seeing folks, progress in their careers as well as process. Don't love all the politics, of course, that comes along with management, but I'm hoping that the, mentorship portion will be enough to tide me over.
I love that, and especially the part about politics. Moving along strong. We have another question. Oh my gosh, hi, sweetheart, love her. What are some tips you have for a transitioning resume? I'm also coming from an engineering background, software to be exact. Where are you trying to transition to? Design? I don't know. That was my question for her. But anyway, move along strong.
I'll answer it as if you're transitioning into design. So the resume, I'd say, I don't know if it necessarily. So there's a couple things. Your resume, you can make it design or E, which means we're all a little bit extra. And maybe we made it in Figma and put it into a PDF and like put your own little splash on it. Maybe your logo's on there. You got some cool fonts going on. So you can change up literally the format of it to look a little bit fancier or like attention to detail. Additionally, for your resume, I'd say if you've got projects or if it is a PDF and you can link to those prototypes or anything like that, I think can be useful. But, the key part is really your portfolio. That's where you're showcasing your work. And that's also true for if you're in user research as well. You can put just user research projects in there where you show all your methodology and the deliverables that you came up with. But really, that's your selling point. Typically is the portfolio where you can really showcase the stuff that you've done, as well as include like prototypes and links and things like that. as well as talk through your design process. So, I'd say, I guess you could make the resume a little bit prettier as well as include some projects and things like that, but the portfolio is your place to shine.
I love that. And plus one to portfolio as well. We have another question from Brianna. This is such a tight presentation. Yep. Shout out to Maya. Do you recommend people get experience in other industries before pivoting into products? For example, a background in consulting helped your presentation skills, which is helpful.
Sure. I think it all depends on where you're at in your life and what you want and what you've got going on. So, if you have two competing ideas, so for instance, at the beginning, when I was just figuring out, like, do I want to be a product designer or a user experience designer? I also was checking out going into higher ed and working for the Office of Multicultural Affairs at my prior university. Or maybe I was super involved with track and field in college and high school. Did I want to be a coach? Quickly realized on the coach front that I did not want my career to depend on how teenagers felt that day, but it was a fun experience for me. And so I say all this to say, if you've got some competing ideas of what you might want to do next, I'd say go for it. But if you really are set on wanting to be a product or UX UI or user researcher, or any of those, smaller subsidiaries, just go for it. Just like jump right in, start learning, start building that portfolio. Of course, things will help you, but also learn to talk to the experience that you've had. So I mentioned, a career in the service industry, right? You're probably incredibly great at time management as well as customer service, all those communication soft skills that you can really talk about. I once had a person tell me about how they changed the layout of the cafe that they were working at, or to just make it the user experience better. So just putting all the condiments and things in a place that made a lot more sense, like just moving things around. And I was like, you literally just told me about how you improved UX in the real world. Like that will directly translate to, your software or what you're designing. And so if you just think about the stuff that you've done thus far, I'm sure you can find examples of skills that are incredibly important within product design that are transferable.
Wow, I love that, and that was a really great example of different ways that you can go ahead and use that as well, Brianna. So I hope that answered your question. We have one more question from Jasmine. There seems to be an overlap in the product designer role and UX UI designer role. So what skills or responsibilities distinguish them from each other? That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say there aren't any. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of words floating around in the industry that kind of essentially mean the same thing. But it depends on the company and the role is where you're really actually going to find the distinction. So for instance, this is a generalization, but it's usually true. At a much larger organization, I'm talking your Microsoft, your Amazon, your Big Fang, whatever. That's where you're going to see, even at Athena, that's where you're going to see the distinguished user researcher, potentially a UI designer who's maybe just focused on the design system, or even is a part of marketing maybe and works on that stuff, as well as potentially even, it's rarer these days that I've seen just the UX who only does the wireframes, but still not unheard of. And so that's where you'll see the more divisional things, although the lines are always blurred and are constantly shifting. And then the product designer role traditionally is like all that stuff combined to do like everything as a generalist. So you're doing your user research, you're building your design system, maybe you're doing the UI work, the high fidelity, the low fidelity, you're building the wireframes, the user journeys, all that stuff. The testing is typically kind of the umbrella. So if I were to answer this question very simply, I'd say UX UI designer kind of falls within product designer because product designer is like the top umbrella, and then there's all these other things that fall within it. However, you might be talking to somebody and they're like, I want a UX designer when they meet product designer. It all depends on the role in the company and what they're looking for you to do. And I'm also of the mindset to anything you're interested in, just like learn it. And if as you're going through that, you're like, no, I don't want anything to do with UI design, I just want to do research, then deep dive into there. I'd say research is the clearest cut separate one. I see, Chanel, you're nodding your head. Clearest cut separate one because it stands alone in so many other industries that folks tend to, okay, you're just a researcher, and then you're like a UX UI product, blah blah blah. But usually the UX UI product people should know a little bit of research. So that's, in my experience, what I've seen.
I love that. And Jasmine, I hope that also answered your question. Very, very true. Like, for instance, UX researcher is not used at Apple. We use human factors engineers. So it's very, very important to just make sure you're reading the job description very, very well. Make sure you are internalizing. Making sure that you understand also the tools that they also have in there as well. That should also be a distinction of the different kinds of designers that they may be looking for as well. So if you see like 3D prints and other kind of stuff, that might not be your kind of product that you're looking for. But yeah, again, super excited to have you. Thank you so very much, Maya. I hope you all had a wonderful time with Maya. She's absolutely fantastic and so well-rounded and knowledgeable. We love her heart. We love the company. They have some pretty awesome initiatives happening too. And also are hiring as well. So if you're interested in some opportunities with OM, please go ahead and reach out to Maya. We went ahead and put her LinkedIn here in the chat. So you guys can go ahead and shoot her a nice little connection request. Let her know that you found her right here on the Meant to Be Collective. Maya, how else can folks find you or follow you? Are you on Dribbble or different other design platforms as well that they can follow your work?
Great question. I'd say LinkedIn is probably the best. Like I mentioned, I tend to get pretty overwhelmed. I feel like during the pandemic, I have really slipped up. I'll be perfectly honest with all the folks here in terms of like staying on top of things because there's just like too much. But back in the day, yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably the best. I am on Twitter, but I'm not great at tweeting. So I'll just say LinkedIn is great. My website is okay, and this is a really great reminder for me to update it, which is just mayareinhardt.com. But other than that, you might see me in some Slack workspaces. So I am within the Where Are the Black Designers group, as well as Black Suit Design, as well as, I'm involved with stuff with Mentor Me Collective. So you might see me again here. But yeah, that's honestly probably the best as well. Of course, you can check out the OM website where we highlight some of our projects that we've been working on. But otherwise, LinkedIn's probably at least right now, maybe if I get my act together, it's probably the best place to find me.
Listen, we're here for it. Okay, we're taking life one day at a time. So y'all go ahead and connect with Maya on LinkedIn. Shoot her a request. Again, we're so excited to have you and so grateful to have you a part of our community, Maya. And we also look forward to some awesome future events as well. So everyone, we look forward to seeing you all a little later. Again, we do have our photo booth. So if you guys want to go ahead and let us know that you came to this amazing session, go ahead and head over to our photo booth. I'm actually going to put up the QR code here again. You guys should see it over here in the right-hand side. I hope it's the right or the left, child. Y'all see it. In your camera at it, let us know, take a nice little selfie, and let folks know on LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever social platform, tag us. Let us know that you came to the Design on Purpose Product 101 session. So everyone, we hope you all have a wonderful rest of the night, and see you later, everyone. Bye.
Bye.